Welcome to the program. I am Suren. Let us talk about time. Every hour of every day, we all push the limits of time. Now, that is a reality. However, I have a yearning question. Is time travel possible? A while ago, I have spoken about this issue over my weekly programs on radio, broadcasting locally and on the internet. Journeying into the future or into the past. Is it at all possible? Once upon a time, it was considered a fantasy. In fact, many people of science backgrounds tend to cling to research into such trends. One scientist that I know of claimed that he made music travel through time. In scientific observations, time and space are linked to speed up the process. Flying rather than driving, say from LA to New York, or Sydney to Melbourne to Perth, cuts time from days to hours, and any increase in speed allowing more space to be crossed in less time. Air travelers may not be aware of it as it was once with Concorde, and in reality, they take a trip into the future. How? Remember, the faster they fly, slower their watches tick, compared to the ones on the ground. When landing, however, perceptively, they jump forward in time. Albert Einstein had predicted a few decades ago that time flows slower for one moving in high speed than someone standing still. This is what causes all the airline passengers jump forward into the future, and that is called time dilation. Faster you go, stranger it becomes. Take, for instance, the twins. One is in a spacecraft going to meet his brother, and the clocks are so slow on the spacecraft, and he stretches the age differences. While the one is 2 years older, the other is aged for about 140 years. Considering that the spacecraft is faster than any aircraft and therefore the time dilation effect is greater. The astronauts orbit the Earth in more than 17,000 miles an hour, and if they would stay in space more than a year, on their return they would have gained 3.8 seconds in Earth time. Therefore, they would have jumped into the future. Here is an interesting question. When going forward is so simple, why are the vehicles of flight are not designed accordingly? We will need to travel thousands of times faster than what we have got currently. If the shuttle could travel, say 4,000 times faster, quicker it would leap, that is more than 60,000 years in time. Like NASA, many other nations have faster rockets, but they are not at all fast enough. we will need to break insurmountable barriers first. Once, sound barrier was considered only imaginary, but the light barrier might make things somewhat a little weirder. Imagine now traveling very fast at the speed of a bullet. As we accelerate to catch up with another bullet, time dilation begins to occur. But when we catch up with it, that would seem to stop in midair. However, when overtaking the speed of light, time would flow backwards. Everything would go in reverse, making the world a very mysterious place, and the laws of physics indicate that we can never travel faster than light. But then again, there may be some scientific loopholes that would allow us to travel back in time. We are now beginning to see theoretical models showing us that time travel is possible. A new invention, a new modern equipment or vehicle might be needed, and that could easily be just an empty room. Understandingly, superfast starships may not be enough. Furthermore, when we gain speed, we gain mass. More mass means a certain amount of increased gravity at 186,000 miles a second, and we might also be crushed with gravitational forces before making through the light barrier. One loophole we can think of is the so-called wormholes, which bypass space and time by jumping through them in split-second hops. There would be no side effects experienced. Wormholes exist in the so-called document of the subatomic world, their openings being billions of times smaller than the width of an atom, and turning them into highways and going into the past is possible. But 1,000 years of travel to the moon can be fantasized. Then only on July 1969, Neil Armstrong took his first step and the magic of fantasy became a reality. Time travel would change our lifestyles. When one goes into the future and changing an event, you could be trapped in a different universe, and it may be a parallel one without any chance to return from. That is probably the nature's way of making sure, says Oxford University's David Deutsch, that what has happened remains. He calls it the multi-universe theory of yet another loophole, and he believes all the replicate worlds similar to ours would have different historical outcomes. One can go into some other time and meet another copy of oneself, and they may be the replicates of you but existing somewhere else, whereas in one other you may have never existed. Think about that. Are there then any time travelers now amongst today's humans? It is possible that those others from the future may have arrived to seed the Earth of today with genetic work and DNA molecules of life. Then one wonders, have they also used the wormholes? Have they mastered yet another way to work with the speed of light? In Cologne, Germany, a Dr. Günther Nimz has stunned the world by breaking the light speed limit using an unusual phenomenon called quantum tunneling, allowing particles of light to sidestep with the barriers of time and space. When, for example, music was loaded into such system, after the reception on the barrier, that piece of music could be decoded and replayed. This method allows the 5 times more than the velocity of light. Can we send ourselves and watch ourselves as children and even see our own birth? That's a good question. How about our minds? Dr. Jack Sarfati, the physicist, believes that without the body, the mind can telepathically communicate with other minds of the past or even the future. Shall we start doing it? Assyrians of 1000 BC used many incantations. As for everything in regards to health, food intake, and even for digestion issues. And at least in one of them, we discover this. After Anu had created the heaven, and the heaven had created the earth, and the earth had created the rivers, and the rivers had created the canals, and the canals had created the morass, and the morass had created the worm. The worm went before Shamash, weeping, his tears flowing before Ea. What wilt thou give me for food? What wilt thou give me for my drink? I will give thee dried fig and apricot. Then asked the little worm to be placed among the gums and the teeth. And upon this it was prayed for Ea to smite the little worm with the might of his hand. They thought the entire universe was controlled by higher forces and gods Anu, Ea, and Shamash. In fact, there is no doubt that the humans were not only intimately intermingled with the entire nature, but played an important role therein. Although mankind had distanced themselves from the existing universe today, for it has seemed remote to everyday living on Earth. Today's understanding, however, shows that man is a truly primal and real part of the entire cosmos. Therefore, one tends to ask, what could be the connection between us and that of the universe? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on earth? We read in the book of Job. One small note on planet Mars, amongst many others, by the ancient Egyptians was Sek Det F M Het Het, which translates, who travels backwards. This is actually a reference to its retrograde motion. Thus, during Ptolemy's time, the motion of the planets were known. How can one explain this? Sumerian Enuma Elish, circa 2500 BC, reports, in the orchards of the gods, he watches the canals. Now that the destinies of heaven and earth have been fixed, trench and canal have been given their proper course. The banks of the Tigris and the Euphrates have been established. What else shall we do? What else shall we create? O Anunnaki, you great gods of the sky, what else shall we do? The Assyrian account of the creation of man, 800 BC. Humanity, it seems, is being left in confusion, and its situation is being taken advantage of. Despite all this, some still try wondering how man has become the way he is today, and how he really started. Creationists claim to prove the facts related to the creation of man, as with everything else he is involved with. Evolutionists, on the other hand, claim to prove the facts related to the missing links. More discoveries, excavations, restructuring, and using carbon or other dating methods. Thus, the evolutionary process of man. Can both be right or wrong? Perhaps we need to look into or turn our attention to some other discoveries and findings wherein we seem to observe similarities with both systems and further puzzles. This is when one begins to ask the questions, starting with what if? Yet we do not need to go too far. The story of creation, or the making of, and fabulous findings leading to the story of evolution, claiming man's relationship with the primates or development of him from simple single organism into more complexities, resulting in the formation of humanity with perhaps mixed variations of racial structures. How indeed the races came about. When we consider both the story of Genesis and the story relating to the making of man of the ancients, we seem to draw closer to yet one other understanding, which neither denies nor nullifies both schools of thought. Creation and evolution, for both cannot be disproven. Therefore, considerable consideration should be given to both. We really need to look into the ancient texts, and one is particularly favored, the Epic of Creation and the Epic of Gilgamesh, wherein we discover a different condition none can ignore. There we discover that there were supreme beings, deities, or scientists of a different ilk who decided to make organic robots or worker man. Lulu Amelu, to do the tasks Anunnaki, a group of volunteers or conscripted folk who protested. It probably was too hard, arduous, and dangerous for them to do what they were assigned for. This was then accepted and approved by the assembly of gods. Then a laboratory scene comes into view. Could it be that all those scientists, doctors, nurses, speaking an ancient tongue, and were seen by the ancients and considered no more than being just as the word indicates, an epic of ancients? A further study, however, reveals how advanced those supreme beings have been, but the language was lacking finesse and could not properly translate into today's understanding within the highly developed world languages such as English, German, French, Russian, Hindu, or Chinese. Perhaps it is time to start to reconsider those articles of ancient reporting in different and unbiased ways. We will come back to this issue of the making of man as we progress. Until then, smile and be happy. Thank you for watching.